I initially wasn't even planning on playing this tournament that you already know the result of from the title of this video, but Corvidalin actually changed my mind. If you guys have been following all the videos on my channel, you've probably seen this one where I woke up to a text from Corvidalin basically saying that he was at the airport waiting for his girlfriend to be done with some school, so he asked if I wanted to play some disc golf. Of course I said yes, asked him if he wanted to film something.
It's 430 feet down there. Just a hyzer shape though, so he's throwing like 4-speed probably.
We were just talking, and I was obviously asking questions as someone who's aspiring to become a Pro Tour level disc golfer, and basically asking like, if my YouTube channel continues to grow, thank you guys, please subscribe, then I might be able to have like the ability to tour next year. But should I? Are there things that I need to be like waiting to do? And he essentially said that, yeah, play the events that you can, but there's experience that you can gain from your local scene that you just cannot get on the Pro Tour level. And so I remember like we had a long conversation on hole 17 just about that. And he asked me like, how many wins do I have? And I just started playing MPO this year. I started playing disc golf last January, if you're new to the channel. And during all of 2022, I got 1 MA2 win and 2 advanced wins. And then I moved up into MPO this year, and I hadn't won anything yet, and Cole basically told me, hey, you need to win 3 events. He said all this because there's this experience that you can get at the local level that you really can't get on tour. Like, I'm not really gonna get the experience of what it means to either like sleep on a lead or have to make a comeback for a win, or what it feels like those last couple holes and battling it out. Like, I'm not gonna be able to get that experience my first year, my first 2 years, maybe ever on the tour. And hopefully that's viable because the tour continues to grow and the purses continue to grow. But if I want to be even relatively competitive on tour, I'm gonna need to build up just in my mental game and then in my experience, what it feels like to have won tournaments, have gone through adversity to do that, and even just to know that like I am a good disc golfer who is capable of winning events, or at least like playing as well or better than I expect to. Funnily enough, that round that I played with Corvidalin was actually a practice round for an A tier, the Colorado State Championships, which Cole called the Colorado Hyzer State Championships, which at that course at least pretty much was. And I was planning for that to be my last event. Then I'll have basically a full month or 6 weeks of an off season and then play the Battle for Bedford, which I am back from now. That coverage will be coming out starting Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Those 3 rounds, 2 at New London, 1 at Ivy Hill. Basically a 2024 Worlds preview that you get to see me play, which will be much worse than how the pros play and hopefully how I play next year if I get into Worlds. And so that conversation really got me thinking, and I actually went home that day to see if there were any tournaments that I could think that I would be able to go into and have the opportunity to win. If you guys don't know, in Colorado, you have big names like Aaron Gossage and Eagle McMahon who don't really play a lot of local tournaments, but there's local shark who might be like the best local disc golfer in the world, Joe Revere. He's the 2-time reigning Masters World Champion. He plays a lot of the bigger A tiers, B tiers, and even a lot of C tiers. And I saw that there was 2 tournaments within about an hour from one another, and he was going to 1. And so I thought, if I'm gonna get some experience trying to win, I should probably go to the tournament that he's not playing at because he's 1035 rated. And I think he won the tournament that I'm talking about by like 15 strokes or something. Anyway, I find this tournament, which is the Mile High Disc Golf Club Fall Fling or something. And I noticed that if I was to sign up, I would be the highest rated player there, which I wasn't anticipating that to be the case because I know like I can beat some 990 guys. I can beat some 1,000 rated guys. I tend to do that at most tournaments that I play because they either play bad or I play well. But being the highest rated was going to add an extra element of difficulty, I thought, to my chances at winning this tournament because now the expectation is that I will win. Like statistically, numerically, I'm supposed to win this tournament if I sign up for it. This tournament was basically directly splitting down the middle, the Colorado Hyzer State Championships and the Battle for Bedford. So it meant that my off season was gonna have to kind of take a little bit of a back seat, which ended up being okay because right after this tournament, literally the day after, I flew out to go and film with Drew Gibson. Hopefully you guys have seen the Backhand Bootcamp series. It's actually gonna be a full uninterrupted video of all 7 of those episodes that goes on my second channel, which we're gonna call Banana Frolf. Gonna finish editing that like today or tomorrow, and that'll go up there if you want to watch like 4 hours of unedited goodness. Now this course is one that I have played a decent bit. It's not super close to me, so I don't get out to it as often as I would like, but I was already relatively aware of the layout and there were essentially no changes. But there's always significant wind at this course. So I knew that I wanted to get at least 1 practice round in, and this is actually a full video that I had filmed, and I'm gonna use a lot of this footage to overlay as I'm talking about these holes because I played with my buddy Jordan Whistler, but we decided to go out and film a practice round where instead of like playing against one another or doing a scoring round, we just tried to shoot 18 down. We didn't, which is why that video is not on the channel, but it's still great footage for this video. Now, I knew that Jordan was going to be one of the people to beat, and during my best round of the year, which was a 1050 rated round earlier in May, I was like tied with Joel Freeman, one back of Joe Revere, going into the second round of that tournament, and Jordan actually came back and beat me in that tournament. So we were on the same card, and so I knew that like he kind of fed off the momentum of us playing together, and I didn't very well during that tournament round. But we were buddies, so I was hoping to be able to play with him. I just knew that he kind of like ups his game a lot when that happens. He has a very high skill ceiling, so that was a little bit scary. We filmed this practice round. My game felt all right, not phenomenal. Everything felt like good enough, but nothing felt great. But I knew that if I was just really consistent and everything was a 70% instead of one thing being 100%, one thing being 20%, I would still have a good chance at potentially winning this tournament. Now, the night before gave me a little bit of extra stress, kind of, because I saw the payout for this C tier. There was like 30 MPO players, and it was a C tier, and so I was like, oh, maybe if you win, you get like $200, $250, nothing insane. And I looked, and shout out to TDs for this, but first place won $600, second place won $400, third place won $200, $250, something like that. And so being the highest rated person in the field and knowing that I can get a $600 payday after paying in like $70 or something, maybe 50 for this tournament, added a little bit of extra stress going into the tournament. Now, honestly, filming these tournaments can add an extra layer of lack of focus. There's only so many things that you can focus on at a time. I don't typically mind when I have a caddy, but I didn't want to have to like find a caddy for this tournament. And I really just wanted to try to go in and just see, am I good enough to actually win if I put my energy and my focus into doing that. So I don't have the actual footage from this round, but we'll talk through it and overlay the footage that I already did film with Jordan as well. But it started with a pretty cold day, which I'm not super used to. I think it was in the 40s to start the tournament. It did warm up throughout the first round, but I started on hole 2, and it's not typical that I like birdie the first couple holes, but I knew that you have to put out a number at this course in order to feel good. And I was thinking that I was gonna take around 18 to 19 under par to like be in contention, and if you really want to win 11 per round, so probably 22 would probably do it for you, because that'd probably be around 10-20 rated for the event. I ended up making a 20-foot putt kind of right off the bat. Putter's still feeling a little bit shaky, but that felt good, and started a 4-hole birdie streak. And then of course, I say this during the practice round, and then I go ahead and do it. All right, this is the most boring hole in the course that I'm gonna par both rounds. 178 feet, straight ahead, ESP zone. Literally the easiest hole in the course, 178 feet. I somehow throw it to 35 feet up the hill right and just doink the birdie putt. Doesn't give me a roll away. I par the next hole, and then I get back on the birdie train on hole 8 and 9. Hole 10 is close to a lot of OB, but it's definitely one that you want to get. I just left my forehand a little bit wide, ended up just laying up to try to keep the momentum, because honestly, sometimes in laying up versus like running putts, you kind of have to know both the field that you're playing against, because you're obviously playing against the course, but you are in a way playing against the field, and you have to like understand how your momentum is going to work for you. Maybe like not even thinking about it as momentum, because I know some people don't like that term, but thinking about it as like just your overall stress from the entire round that you're playing. Because for me, I was 40 feet away. I could have run the putt. I could potentially take another birdie, which would be a really good thing to do. But I knew that there were 11 more birdies or 10 more birdies out there that I could earn. And so I decided to lay up, which for me did two things. One, it meant I didn't bogey, or worse. Like I could easily, if I run that putt, I go OB. Like almost guaranteed if I don't hit some sort of metal. There's gonna be some stress that builds in me from knowing that I have to like make this putt. If I miss it and go OB, then I'm disappointed in myself and maybe make some more bad mistakes going down the road, because my mental game maybe isn't as good as I wanted it to be. But if I laid that up and I do it well and I just drop in my par, which is what I did, then I execute my game plan. I know I have to lay up, which there's some stress in there, but it's much less stressful than trying to run that putt. And so I lay it up and I tap it in, and I'm like, okay, I just did two things that I wanted to do. I laid up and I tapped in. So I go into the next hole having a really positive mindset about what I just did. And that next hole was a pretty difficult hole, 390 feet, and then you can go up the gut or take the big hyzer. I was feeling good about the big hyzer going into it, just because the wind was helping. If the wind wasn't helping, I wouldn't have felt very good about it. But Jordan and I had practiced that play a lot. And so I throw the big hyzer with my pink destroyer, leave it to 15 feet. Everything's feeling great about it, and I just miss the putt off like the last chain on the right side and tap in for my par. For some reason, even though I still got the same score as the hole before, it kind of goes to that point that my like mental game was a little bit rattled there, just because I'm like, man, this is a putt that I absolutely should have made. I didn't let it affect too much, honestly, but my putt did feel a little shakier. The next hole, I'm basically playing for a hopeful birdie, but it's like on this crazy mound that I try to throw something flat at it and let it turn. It turned a little bit too far to the right, and I basically told myself, if I'm not within 20 feet putting up at it from the tailwind side, I'm laying this thing out for a par, and that was my game plan. Executed that again, and so that gave me some confidence where I threw a decent drive, went a little bit long, and then the craziest putt, like, it should not have gone in. Didn't deserve it to go in, but sometimes that's why you putt with super like medium or soft style plastics, because it just kind of crept up over the rim and went right in the basket. So that gave me a little bit of confidence, because I was like, man, I stole a stroke there. And moving into hole 14, which is a 480-foot par 3, pretty downhill, and we had a slight helping wind, and so I was kind of in full send mode. I knew that if I flexed something that I knew would come back at the right time, it'd be hard for me to go OB right, and I just wanted to see if I could get down there and get the birdie, because it wasn't a hurting wind, it was a helping wind. I ended up throwing a destroyer, and it's pretty perfect, and it landed me to 25 feet, and I cashed the putt just over the cage. Honestly, pretty good putt on a slightly elevated basket, and was one of only a couple birdies on that hole, and that was absolutely a bonus. I chalked that hole and the hole that I played for par, like I said, unless I had that tailwind putt, 2 pars, and so I was like, there's 16 birdies out here for me. I was really stoked to get that birdie. And then hole 15, parked it with forehand with my ESP zone, just like I had done in practice all the time. And then 16, I end up throwing a really big hyzer on the forehand, similar to these shots that I'm showing you, except instead of actually giving it any height at all, even though the wind was fine, I like threw a laser beam, and so it just went past the basket and straight, and a good shot, but like way left. I was like 80 feet away, and so I pitched up, tried to give it a little bit of a soft bid, was 5 feet away from the basket, no worries at all. Put the putt dead center from about 8 feet, and it just comes right off the pole in these little Mach 3s, straight back at me over the cage. The only bogey of that round, spoiler, there's like 3 holes left that I'm gonna talk about, but that was really disappointing, and like, it's just hard when you do everything right and the course doesn't give it to you, but at the same time, you know that everyone's playing on these baskets. I could have put it a little lower. I could have taken an extra second. I could have put it a little more nose up so it didn't just bounce off of it. Like, there are things that I could have done to have made sure that I made that putt, and that lapse in focus, even though it's on these stupid baskets, cost me a stroke. You could blame the course, you could blame yourself. Both are probably true to do, and so I kind of mixed the blame between both of those. End up throwing a really bad forehand on the next hole, throwing a really bad backhand on hole 18, and my card finished on hole number 1. I hadn't looked at scores up to this point because I tend to not like to look at scores until either the second round or it's going to be consequential to my game plan. But I knew that I was only 8 down, and I felt like 9 or 10 would be 1,000 rated, and I always like to shoot at least 1,000 rated rounds. Trying to shoot closer to the 1020 because I really want to get to 1020 rated at some point, maybe by the end of next year. Probably take a little bit longer than that, but have my like baseline of a good round be 1020 instead of 1,000. Whereas this year my baseline of like a decent to good round was like 1,000. My bad rounds were like 970-ish. My good rounds were 920 plus. And so I want to move all that up about 20 to 30 ratings points. And so I was trying to think about that a little bit here, but ultimately it just comes down to I need to execute the shot in front of me, which was a 355-foot, slightly uphill, plays closer to like 380, 385. So I threw just a big hyzer with my destroyer, no worries at all. And then it almost didn't skip across the road. It kind of had like a little check skip that barely like knurled across the road, put me in bounds with a 25-foot putt that I had to straddle and go through these weird branches. Was able to catch that, so that felt good going out of that round and into round 2 when I ended up looking at scores and saw that I was 1 back of the lead. The lead was 10 down. I shot a 9 down, 997 rated round with that spit out, and then just a couple other silly mistakes and missed putts, but really only missing 1 circle 1 putt because I don't really count 16 as like a missed circle 1 putt, even though on the statistics it's going to say that. And so I ended up going to Subway, I think, grabbed some lunch, try to like not go out with anybody because I was like trying to get in the right mental headspace of, okay, I'm going to come back from this 1 stroke and win the tournament. The only thing that I was nervous about was the fact that I have a very high PDGA rating. I think I was the highest rated in the field, but I also had the highest PDGA number, not rating, I mean PDGA number. If you don't know how cards are decided for second and third rounds of tournaments, the first round's typically random unless there's like a feature card or something, which sponsors might have some say in. I don't quite know, I'm not a TD. But for the following rounds, it's decided by 2 things. Is the hot round and then your PDGA number. So since there were 4 of us tied at 9 under par, I was really worried that even though I was on a card of 5 people the first round, I was somehow going to be off the league card because I wanted to like see kind of what the league card was doing. I didn't want to have to check scores all the time. I wanted it to be a little bit more vibes based. And since I had the highest PDGA number, I was going to be the 5th person to get put on a card. And so I thought that would either be the top of the chase card, or if they did 5 cards, it would be the bottom of the lead card. Which luckily, it ended up being that, and it ended up meaning that I was actually going to be playing with Jordan, who had also shot a 9 down. So going into the second round, I made sure that my putt felt a little bit warm, and ultimately I was just going to say, I got to park everything. If I don't park it, that's fine. Just make sure that it stays in bounds, and I got to make my putts. But my game plan was, this is a course where like a lot of holes are very parkable. There's like one easy par 4, which you should get every time, even though it's a really skinny green. But I started on the same exact hole, and I teed off last. Luckily, hole 1, I basically parked it. I think I like hit the rocks that were there with my forehand and sat, so I had just a little tap in. Jordan also birdied it. A couple other people on the card also birdied it. Now this is where like Jordan's power really comes in, and this is like what's a little intimidating, because the more power you have, the more you can like tone down and control potentially. Like that's what the ceiling of having more power allows you to do. Whether or not you can do it is a whole different question, but that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to get a lot more power now. Now Jordan is one of those people who does have a lot more power, and almost all the time can control it very well. And so moving into hole number 3, which is our second hole, I just threw my placement shot knowing that I had to throw an upshot to get my birdie. Jordan goes for the pin, which is 514 feet, slightly uphill, and he goes out of bounds but like 30 feet away. So he still has a potential putt for a birdie. I throw my upshot with my pure and get like the luckiest kick ever. It like flips a little more than I anticipate, and so it's like hitting the ground flat. And instead of just like skipping straight, it like starts to get a little hyzer edge, and it's like probably gonna get back in bounds, but maybe not, you don't really know. And then like a rock just kicks it right next to the basket, like 15 feet away. Like I still had to make a little bit of a putt, but somehow kept me in bounds, which was a massive win, because messing up that upshot would have been terrible. Jordan steps up, and this is the same thing that had happened during our whole entire practice round. He just made every single freaking putt. And so I knew that he was coming in with a hot putter, and so I was gonna need to also have a hot putter and be throwing slightly better, because I was gonna have to beat the person who was one ahead of us, but also have to beat him, who was like the main person that I was worried about on the card, because I knew that we fed off each other's energy. He catches like 30, 35 foot birdie putt after going OB. So he has a OB birdie on a 515 foot hole. It's a little unfair. I ended up birdieing hole 4, hole 5, and hole 6, literally parking all of them. Like I didn't really have a putt. They were all inside the bullseye. Jordan missed hole 4 and hole 5, and so I had 2 strokes on him going into hole 7, which we both ended up parring. I actually thought that I threw it OB because I just threw like kind of a line drive that never started to fade, and luckily there was a fence that has like some shrubs in it that like stopped my disc from being out of bounds. I did run it, which was a little more scary than maybe I wanted to, but I wanted to like keep my birdie streak alive. I felt like I had good momentum, and I trusted, like I only like half trusted that I could make the comebacker. Luckily, I had a 25-foot comebacker that I hearted, which felt really good, but if I'd missed that putt, that would have changed a lot of like my mentality. But it was probably helpful that I had that putt moving into the next hole. Hole 8's 310 feet. We had a tailwind instead of a headwind. So I threw it a little bit higher than I had in round 1, where I had parked it in round 1. I'm throwing first. I go ahead and throw and leave myself about a 25, 30 footer. Jordan comes up and parks it. And at this point, the other guys on our card had all either bogeyed or parred enough holes that like they were still in it. But if I continued to play that I was, and Jordan continued to birdie as much as he did, it was gonna be probably between us. I step up to my 25 footer, and I don't remember if I hit it high or low or whatever, but it was dead center, and so my putt was feeling good because I'm dead center, moving into an easy par 4, 615 feet, where like I had a look from about 90 feet, 100 feet in round 1 for the eagle, because it's pretty downhill, but this round didn't quite get a hold of it as well, still was able to pitch up and make about a 20-foot putt for another birdie. And so I'm 7 down through the first 8 holes. Hole 10 is that one that is right next to the OB. And I was thinking about it between rounds that was a hole that I felt like I made a big mistake on, because I could go OB right next to the basket and take the same score as my layup. And if I don't go OB, then I have a really easy birdie. Obviously, I'm not trying to. I'm trying to like basically pin it just a little bit left inside of it. And so I threw my more stable zone, my Z zone this time instead of my ESP zone. And I felt perfect out of my hand. Hits the ground, gets a little soft skip, hits the pole, and then trickles out of bounds. So I had to drop in 3, but Jordan steps up with his pig. I think he puts it to like 25 or 30 feet and makes another really nasty putt. And now he's taking the box from me. He's only 1 back at this point, and hole 11 is that 390-foot par 4 that I threw the big hyzer on last time. Jordan steps up first, takes his Emperor and throws a massive hyzer, like just like out of this world high. We thought it was like 40 feet short. I think there were some squirrels that were on Jordan's side for this tournament, because once we got up there, it ended up being literally underneath the basket. But we were looking for it 40 feet short, and someone's like, wait, is there an orange disc up here? And it's like, oh, that's his disc. Awesome. Because the wind was now a little bit of a left to right instead of a right to left, I didn't have the helping wind for the hyzer, so I didn't feel comfortable throwing a 390-foot hyzer. So I took my honor instead and gave it a little bit of flex. So it would turn, it would ride a little bit of the wind, but it would fight out of it enough that it would give me a birdie look. And I had 40 feet, put my putt up, felt phenomenal, crashing into the right side, hit almost all the chains, and just barely trickled out right side. It was a putt that I'm like, man, this sticks 7 out of 10 times, but it wasn't center. So like, it's still one that like I could have absolutely putted it better, but that was also like, it was sad because now Jordan and I are tied up again. And I think at this point we're like 1 or 2 strokes ahead of the field. I'm not really worried about the rest of the field because I know that like I just need to play my game, and then Jordan's also going to play his game, and we're going to be battling it out that way. Especially because the wind had picked up and some of the birdies got a lot harder. And so I always like when it's a little bit windier because that's another mitigating factor, similar to how there's more OB and more difficult. It's going to mean that the bottom of the field doesn't quite play as well, which makes ratings a little bit better and a little bit more scoring separation. And even though I missed that putt, it still was semi-confidence inducing because I basically did everything that I wanted to do on it. It just didn't give it to me, which is fine. Hole 12 is that really difficult hole that we both ended up parring again, but I actually shanked my drive way off left. Luckily still in bounds, was able to have a decent pitch up and then put it in for the 3, moving into hole 13, which I knew I had another chance. Jordan threw, left it in bounds, but a little bit short, where he probably had about a 40-footer, and at this point the wind is probably 25 miles an hour sustained with a little bit more gust. It was coming from the right to the left, meaning that the hyzer that I was really liking to throw in all of my practice shots, every single shot that we threw was like some sort of backhand that would finish left, either hard with like a Firebird or like a straight up hyzer with like a Pathfinder or an Ultra. And because the wind was pushing right to left, like pretty hard and a little bit of headwind, I knew that like that play was going to be really weird because I also had watched the other guys on my card throw that shot and end up like having it almost swing out of bounds left in the island. So I decided to throw a shot that I'd never thrown before, which I knew would be risky, but I also knew like if I want to win a tournament and if I want to like prove to myself that I'm good at disc golf, there's going to be shots that like I have to know are the right shots in the moment and that I can execute them and then I actually do it. And so I took my red Firebird, my slightly less stable one, because I knew that if I threw it kind of flat, it would get a little turn, and if it was at the left side of the OB, it would absolutely finish back right. Threw the shot, was really nervous about it, got super high in kind of the head right to left, but it did dive back down to the right. I thought I was parked, ended up being about 15 feet, which still is pretty close, but in a little scary wind. Jordan ends up laying up his putt, which was probably a smarter move because it is a slightly elevated basket, and I go up to cash mine, so now I'm up 1. Hole 14, there was no chance that I was even thinking about going for the birdie again on that hole. A headwind, I knew I'm just gonna rip something as hard as I can and throw it to the left side, left myself with maybe about 80 to 100 feet up. Less than that probably, because I just had a step putt that I put under the basket. I took a 3, Jordan also took a 3. Hole 15 is kind of that easy chip forehand that both of us end up parking again, him with his pig, me with my zone. And then 16, we both throw less than ideal tee shots. I'd go ahead and throw my Pathfinder through the gap this time, so that it'll just kind of turn around the tree and go straight. I actually ended up putting in a pink Pathfinder instead of the red ones because the Ethos ones were beating in relatively fast for me. So that pink one was actually perfect. I just threw it slightly too low, gets caught up in the shrubs, and I got about a 50-footer. Threw a putt, felt really good about it, and it just kind of drops last minute, hits the cage, was a little bit low, but dead center, so that's again like has me feeling pretty good moving into the final 3 holes, knowing that I still have the 1-stroke lead, and there are 3 birdies left on the course, and I felt like I needed to get all 3 of them to actually win the tournament. Hole 11, the wind was pushing us a little bit left to right, and so even though I had messed up and threw an OB in the first round, I knew that I could put it a little bit wider and give it some decent height, and hopefully have it sit kind of closer to the basket. And at this point, I think I might have checked scores, but when I did, I noticed that it was like Jordan and I, and then there was another guy, shout out Cole Baba, who was playing as well, and he was like, he could catch us if we both didn't birdie anymore at all in these last 3 holes, but if we got any birdies, it was going to be really hard for him to catch us. But he was sitting pretty happy in 3rd place because the rest of the field was a good couple strokes behind Jordan and I. So I throw first, and I threw a shot that was a little bit wider, but did get pushed a lot more by the wind, and I was like, crap, that's OB again. But there was obviously the chance that it wasn't. Jordan goes ahead and throws his pig, some sort of pro plastic, ends up looking like a really good shot, but a little bit juicy. And so we step up there, and he is in bounds, but 20 feet with kind of a tailwind putt, and I'm luckily in bounds, but like 8 feet away. So I was close to the OB, but just barely in bounds. Knowing that like his putt wasn't easy. I think it was probably more than 20 feet. It was like 25, maybe closer to 30 feet. And I was like, oh, he misses this, then I have 2 strokes, and I really just got to play against him on these last 2 holes. But again, you can't count on Jordan to freaking miss a putt like that, especially when he's got me in his sights. And so he ends up stepping up there and just like dead center. Why not? Of course you're gonna throw it dead center. I make my putt, still up 1, going into hole 18, which is a really simple, like it's kind of far. It's like 385 feet, but it's slightly downhill. It's just a hyzer. There wasn't any OB in play, which was a little bit weird for this one. And so the first round, I had thrown like a really bad, like stally nose up driver. And so I knew I can get there with a fairway easily, like my honor. So I decided to throw that on a hyzer instead and end up just like pulling it a little right. The wind, because it's pushing head left to right, just keeps it over a little bit more. I'm a little deep at the pin, but I got about a 50-footer. Jordan steps up, throws a big wide hyzer that he also pulls. And so I'm like, okay, I just let him back in. No worries that we're both like 60 feet. He was slightly out of me. He ends up stepping up to his putt, dead center. Jordan, why are you doing this to me? You're supposed to give me an easy win right now. Like, we're buddies. What are you doing? Know that I like don't want to have to go into a playoff because we both like birdied 1 billion holes in a row to start off the round because that would take like another hour to do. And step up to my putt and just miss it totally low. Like, doesn't even hit the cage. Pretty decent line, but like not even close. End up tapping in, and so now we're tied going into the last hole. Kolbaba, Josh, shout out. He's like 2 or 3 strokes back of us, so he can't really catch us if either of us birdies. If we both par, I think one of us still wins. And Jordan now has the box first. He ends up throwing his scepter, I believe, a Halo scepter. Takes it on the wide hyzer, looks really good, comes in and just hits the leftmoor tree. It's pretty parked, like he's inside the circle, no problem, but he might have an interesting lie. I step up with my destroyer because it's now like a slight headwind, and I knew that like I made the mistake of leaving it too wide earlier in the round, and so I throw a little bit more of a penetrating line that's a little bit less wide because it would probably get a little straighter skip, and it does get that skip, but it skips right into that right bush. So we're both in a bush. I thought that he was absolutely parked. He thought that he was parked, I believe. But we step up there, and unlike hole 10 or 11, whichever it was, that we thought he was 40 feet back and he was parked, this one he's like 20 feet, and he has a little straddle putt. I'm gonna show you this one, because if the tree is here, his like left foot is inside of the tree. And the way that Jordan putts is he brings it down to this left side and then putts it forward. And he ends up kind of throwing the putt, and it hits a lot of the chains on the left side and just drops out. And so I step up to my putt now, knowing that I have a 15-foot putt, really routine for the win at this tournament. I have like to go under this one branch, but it shouldn't really affect anything. It's kind of my typical putting stroke. Kind of frames it up even a little bit. End up stepping up, putting it, I like didn't let myself think for more. I like think about what it meant, think about anything. I just like was like, oh, it's an 15-foot putt. Think about the putt that's in front of you. Step up, catch the putt. Luckily, take home my first win, shooting an 11 down where Jordan shot a 10 down. My round was 1020, his round was 1,008. And so I ended up shooting 1,009 for the event. Blast of a battle to have with him. And he has like so much potential. I can't wait to see kind of what he does soon. But that's how I got my first win. Big shout out to Cole for like making me sign up for that tournament. Also shout out to the TDs for the incredible payday.
So we'll start with MPO, which is Anthony Bonanza.
And so now I got to get those 2 more wins like Cole talks about, but it definitely brought up my confidence that I now know that I have the ability to win an MPO tournament. I have to try to beat some of the local killers in the area, but like there's just like winning here versus getting 2nd or 3rd place against 1 or 2 of those guys who like are expected to win every tournament in the area is still so different, because like knowing that you are 1st place in the field, knowing that I had the highest rating and that like I should have won, and being able to come out and do that was a massive confidence inducer for me. And it even made me a little bit more excited going into the rest of the season. If you guys want to see Jordan on the channel again, like we do like an actual video, let me know. But that's how I won my first MPO tournament. Hopefully many more to come.